Hello, welcome to 2.9 Applications of Percents. In 2.8, we talked about the percent equation, and so in 2.9, we're going to talk about how we can apply that percent equation to real-life problems. The target is I can calculate commission and interest. Commission is money paid to a person for making a sale. So there are certain jobs that some can be paid only on commission, while other jobs will maybe have a salary and in addition a commission. So a salary is where you would make $30,000 for the entire year and you would be paid equal amounts, every 2 weeks or twice a month. A commission is, maybe you have a job, one of these that I listed here, an insurance salesperson or a real estate agent or a car salesperson. Maybe you make a sale, and so in addition to a salary, you may make a commission or a percentage of your sales. So those are only 3 examples of jobs with commission. There are quite a few others. High-end retailers sometimes get paid on commission. Financial advisors may get commission. But lots of jobs have commission in addition to having a salary. So there are some pros and cons to having a job with commission. Pro is if you are a good salesperson, you can make a lot of money, okay? If you're good at sales, that equals high dollars, okay? Or if the product you're selling is highly sought after, you can make a lot of money. A con, meaning something that might be negative, is your pay can fluctuate, right? Fluctuate means change. So let's say there's a slow season. Okay, and so therefore you're not making quite a bit. We all remember COVID, right? The world essentially shut down. If you had a job on commission, sales may have dried up. So that could be a con. Your pay can fluctuate. All right, so let's talk about an example problem. We have a jeweler who makes a base salary of $32,000 plus a 2.5% commission on sales. If his sales were $700,000 for the year, find his total pay. So when we talk about total pay, your total pay is your salary plus commission. Okay, that equals your total pay. So this is where the percent equation can come in. So let's first start off with our salary. His salary is $32,000 for the year. Plus the commission is 2.5% on the sales. Okay, so 2.5% of sales. Think about that. We talk about our percent equation. We can think of the word what. Remember, what is X, is equal, of is multiplication. So what is 2.5% of 700,000? That's his commission. 2.5%, so we can write that over 100, of 700,000. And that's the total pay. Now we can take a look at order of operations, okay? And we'll do our division. We'll get that percentage into a fraction. I know there's not a ton of room here, so I apologize. Times 700,000, again, equals your total pay. Then we would multiply using order of operations here. That should be 17,500, and that's your total pay. And finally, if we add, we get $49,500 is the total pay for this jeweler. That's our final answer. So do you see how that percent equation comes back into play, where we think what is 2.5% of 700,000? All right, let's look at interest. Interest is the amount of money charged for borrowing money. Okay, so when you take a loan to buy a car, to buy a house, you get charged interest. This is how the banks make money. They say, okay, we're going to lend you money, but you're going to pay us back a little more than what we lent you so we can make money. Or interest is also the amount of money earned when saving or investing. So on the flip side, if I'm going to go deposit money into a bank, the bank will pay me interest so I house my money there. So you get a little bit of money back. Principal. Okay, principal is not the guy downstairs in the office at the school. Principal, when we talk about money, is the initial amount of money either borrowed or invested. Okay, so again, if I'm going to purchase a car for $10,000 and I need to go to the bank and say, hey, can I borrow $10,000? That would be my principal. Or on the flip side, let's say I get $5,000 and I want to go invest it in invest it in whatever fund or save it at the bank. I'm going to go deposit that $5,000. That would be principal. So there's a formula we're going to talk about, which is simple interest formula. Now, this is simple interest. In most circumstances, interest is calculated in a compound manner. And maybe you've heard of compound interest. That is something that you'll work with more in Algebra 2. But in terms of just understanding what interest is and being able to calculate, we're going to look at simple interest formula. Simple interest formula, we have I equals PRT. I is the interest. Okay, that'll be your interest earned or your simple interest. P is the principal, the amount you are borrowing or investing. R is your rate in years. Okay, so that is important. And, rewind. Rate, R is your rate, okay, which you're usually given a percent. T is your time in years. That makes more sense. Time in years. All right, so go ahead and make sure you have those identified before we start to use the simple interest formula. All right, so in example 1, I'm going to see if I can keep those letters up here. Example 1 says, find the amount of interest after depositing $200 at a rate of 0.55% annually for 6 years. So this is a really, really low interest rate. However, interest rates on your typical bank accounts are not high at all. Okay, so you'd have to go into a high yield savings account right now to have any, interest rate, maybe 4%. So let's go ahead and identify your I, your P, your R, and your T. So I, P, R, and T. I'm listing them down the left-hand side. My I, that's my interest. Well, I can't quite identify that. Depositing $200, that's my P. Okay, that's my principal. Rate is 0.55%. And T is 6 years. So we don't know what the I is. We always start with our formula. I equals PRT. And then we're going to substitute and solve. I don't have my I, so I'm going to write I. P is my principal, my 200, times rate. So it's 0.55%. So 0.55 over 100 times 6. Okay? Now, I have to find my I. I'm going to first turn my percentage into a decimal, 0.0055 times 6. And then I can plug that all into the calculator and get that after 6 years, if I haven't withdrawn or deposited any money, I'm going to have $6.60 in interest. Again, I had mentioned that's a super low rate, but you get $6.60 in simple interest after 6 years. Let's look at example 2. After 3 months, the simple interest earned annually on an investment of $7,000 was 63. Find the interest rate. So let's identify our I, our P, our R, and our T again. Okay, after 3 months, so remember, time is in years. 3 months, we have to figure out what portion of a year is 3 months. And if we all know that we have 12 months in a year, I can do 3 divided by 12 and get 0.25 years. All right, let's see. The simple interest earned annually on an investment of $7,000, so that was how much was originally invested, was $63. Find the interest rate. I do not know what my rate is. Okay, so I'll start off again. I equals PRT. And let's go ahead and substitute our values in. I was $63. P, $7,000 times rate. I don't know what that is, so I'm going to put it over 100. I don't want to use X. I want to use R. R over 100. You could use X, no big deal. Times 0.25. Okay? Now, these go together. I can rearrange this equation using the commutative property because it's all multiplication, and rearrange and get 7,000 times 0.25 next to one another. When I multiply those, I should get 1750 times R over 100. And the reason I have that R over 100 is because I'll eventually have to multiply that rate by 100 to get the percent. Let's go ahead and divide both sides by 1750. And I should get 0.036 equals R over 100. Multiply both sides by 100 and get 3.6% for my rate. So this is the simple interest formula. I highly recommend you always start by writing out the formula. All right, we will also see percentages in real life when it comes to eating out. So some kids in class were asking, how can you estimate the tax and tip of a meal without using a calculator, a tip calculator? It seems like phones all have tip calculators, or there are apps out there. We can always move decimal points around to get, 10%, multiply it by 2, 20%. It's interesting, and you should ask your parents or somebody at home how they calculate tips when eating out. I know my dad always just taught me to move the decimal point 2 times to get 20%, because that's pretty standard. Nowadays, 20, 25% is a little more standard on, good service and good food. But we're going to actually show you how to calculate it. It might also be helpful next time you're out to eat. See if you can calculate the tip for your family. So let's look at example 3. It says estimate. We're going to actually calculate. The tip on a $42.65 check using a tip rate of, let's do 20%. 15% would be considered low, so maybe you didn't have great service or you didn't have great food. If that's the case, talk to the manager of the restaurant instead of leaving a lower tip, because maybe it wasn't the waiter or waitress's, fault of why the food was not served on time. Maybe they got backed up. So I just remember talking with different friends who were in the restaurant industry. They would rather you tell them, and therefore they could correct the mistake moving forward. So let's calculate this tip on $42.65 using a tip rate of 20%. This goes back to our percent equation. Think, what is 20% of 42.65? Okay, so what is 20% of 42.65? And going back to what is and of, you can make an equation. What is 20% of 42.65. All right, so I have that. And now I just need to plug and chug. I can simplify 20 divided by 100, get 0.20 times 42.65. And I can then get my tip amount. X equals $8.53. Okay? So $8.53. Notice I have a label. We definitely need to have a label. All right? That's how much the tip would be. If I wanted to find out how much I would have to leave, I would have to add my total plus my tip, and that would be the amount left. All right, and now let's take a look at a real-life example about Ruth Chris Steakhouse, which is a really expensive sit-down dinner. All right, so you take your date out to Ruth Chris, and unfortunately for you, she decides to treat herself to the filet mignon. The waiter comes over and places your $145 bill on your table. Since the waiter did a nice job, you want to leave him a nice tip. So it says compute a 20% tip and a 25% tip. So we'll label our work 20% and 25%. And again, we can come up with the question, what is 20% of 145? That will be the left one first. See if you can go ahead and calculate what the tip would be on $145. So let's see, what is 20% of 145? I'll give you a minute, go ahead. All right, let's see if you came up with what is 20% of 145. And finally, your answer was $29. Let's see if you got that. And now go ahead and think, what is 25% of 145? All right, let's see if you set your problem up this way. What is 20% of 145? And hopefully you got $36.25. So in addition to this $145 bill, you're going to leave one of these two tips or somewhere in between. All right, so that's 2.9, applying percentages. Thanks for watching.